If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 400 of the Severe MMA podcast. Who would have thunk it? We got here, not me certainly, but my name is Sean Sheehan anyway, joined today by the Gary Neville in the Premier League of Irish MMA media, Graeme McDonald, as we talk about a week in MMA where absolutely nothing happened. So we're going to answer some of your questions. We're going to look back on maybe a bit of Severe MMA for the last 400 episodes and have a bit of a chat here. We have a few questions in. A few people have asked about, how it got together. I know we've done this a few times before, but I think it's always kind of cool to do it and good to have a chat, especially in a week. We hit a milestone of 400. I think there's very few MMA podcasts that have probably hit 400, and they're shite anyway, even if they have, because we're the best, number one. Anyway, before we get into all of that chit chat, let me tell you that roses are red, violets are blue, and our friends at Manscaped have a gift for you. Manscaped, you know them as the below the waist groomers, but they now are selling beard products as well. Our friends over in the US and Canada, and they're going to be coming everywhere. You can check out manscaped.com right now and see all the products that Manscaped have. They're absolutely fantastic. They've revolutionized grooming, and they're doing it once more now with the new Beard Hedge Pro Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. It's a cordless trimmer that has a rotary wheel with 20 hair cutting lengths all in one guard, so no more messy drawers. Full of add-ons with this kit. It's never been easier to sculpt your precise look at any length, so make sure you're looking extra lovely this Valentine's Day by using the Beard Hedger. And even better, save 20% off and get free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and you use our code SevereMMA. That Beard Hedger Pro Kit is the ultimate toolkit to get the perfect look at this Valentine's Day. 7 million men worldwide already trust Manscaped with their balls. It's time to trust the hair up top as well. You can absolutely revolutionize, as I said, your grooming routine with this. Take it to the next level. The Beard Hedger is the first thing you need to know about the electric beard hair trimmers, premium beard sculpting machine, along with having only one guard, leaving little mess. It's also waterproof. You can shave in the shower to avoid all the hair in the sink or bathroom floor. Plus, the titanium coated T-blade is tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to single stroke efficiency. Manscaped and Valentine's Day are the perfect pair, and the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit doesn't end there. They have created 4 dermatologist tested formulations for your post-trim hygiene. The beard shampoo and conditioner, the beard oil, and the beard balm as well. Absolutely fantastic, all of that stuff. You do not need to remember that your hair, you do need to remember even, your hair in your head is different to your hair in the beard. It's more coarse, easier to damage than the hair on your head. So you need all of this stuff. You need Manscaped's beard oil. No one wants a guy whose beard is brittle and dry like my own at the moment. I need some of that myself. The oil relieves dryness both on the beard and the skin beneath, while adding a little shimmer and shine. And cap it all off, as I mentioned, with the beard balm, a pomade that shapes, styles, moisturizes and tames for the sculpted look. And with that, you get 3 free gifts. Also, a beard brush, comb and scissors to ensure all the tools are there for the perfect beard. From first impression to last, you're going to love it, and everyone who sees your improved facial hair game will love it too. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all your stubble, trouble, and tame your mane this Valentine's. So get 20% off and free shipping. The code SevereMMA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code SevereMMA. Spice up Valentine's Day this year with Manscaped Beard Hedger, 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 links. Graeme, let's do it. Let's have a little bit of a chat here. Any news with yourself anyway? How's things? How are you getting on? You getting back into the swing of things, recording the podcast again, talking about MMA?
All good. We have another break from the UFC after short return. Obviously, that pay-per-view card was very good, but we kind of you think the UFC would have put on another card this weekend, but we have another week break. But I know there's a lot of other MMA on during the week as well. But yeah, I'm a little bit surprised with the scheduling. But I suppose we had a little hiatus from our break, and we're back on the break, it seems.
I think it's good though, because it's kind of, we've kind of slowed our way into the new year, and I'm kind of happy with that as well. Maybe, we got a break. Were we all ready to get back into it 100%? We will be fairly soon, but it's basically February now. We're not back into it 100%. So do you know what? We have 11 months of that to go, so I think that's a good thing. So there's no problem there. Plus we have the big, obviously the Bellator Ireland card coming up, which we'll be very busy for, obviously, and a lot of Irish cards this week, or this year even. So I'm looking forward to all of that. Before we started the podcast, I threw it out today, and apologies if we're recording on Friday night, so if you didn't get your questions in, I'll keep them for the Q&A next week. So we're going to kind of answer some of your questions that you sent in today. We're going to look ahead maybe to the next week's cards if we get a look at them, and just have a general bit of a chit chat here about MMA and other things as well. In place of the Q&A this week, myself and Ian are actually jumping on Patreon. We recorded a podcast there the other night. It's good fun just talking about, covering MMA and how we feel about a few things in MMA and stuff, which myself and Graeme might get into here as well. Let's start off. So first question from our guy, Christopher Graeme. And do you know what? I'm going to hit the... Break the wall! Break down the wall! If you don't normally listen to the Q&A, you probably won't get that. But Christopher Graeme is our top tier question asker, so he gets his own intro, as does Christopher Murphy, as does Mac. Those are my three guys. I have a few other guys as well. Sean Dinney might be getting one. A few other guys might be getting them, but those are number ones. First question. Can you talk about how SevereMMA started and how it morphed into the podcast empire it is today? Graeme, how did SevereMMA start?
I've talked about this before, I think, but basically I was a big MMA fan, big UFC fan, big WEC fan, downloading all fights, watching Pride, like basically just any fights I could find. And obviously I was searching kind of high and wide, trying to find information on Irish MMA, and I had met Carl Pendred before. I knew him a little bit through through school, not through school, but I'd heard of him through playing rugby, and I'd met him in San Diego and things like that. So I knew about a little bit about him. And a couple of my mates had said, "Oh, he was doing MMA and stuff," and I was like, I was kind of the only guy back then that was actually into MMA. So if somebody was doing MMA, I would get all the my friends would come to me to tell me, because I was like the crazy MMA guy. And I basically got a couple of my friends interested, and we started watching, and we went to an event. Like, I wish I could remember properly, but I think it was the Chris Fields Johnny Redmond fight, but I can't remember. It was one of those early cage contenders anyway. And I think I found out about it on boards.ie or something, or maybe I think Cage Contender were one of the only promotions who actually had a website, but it was sparsely updated. But anyway, I found out about the event and went to it, and afterwards I was like, oh, the level here isn't bad at all, and tried to find out information about more shows, and there wasn't really anything. There was a boards.ie like kind of sub forum where people would talk about Irish MMA, but it was obviously a very small community, and it was just basically hard to get information. And there was fighthounds.com or .ie, I can't remember, I think it was .com, that used to go to the odd show and put up stuff like that. So there basically just was no real information, or no easy way to get information about Irish MMA. And I started finding out more about these guys as much as you can, and I was like, I'd had some experience making websites before and things like that, and I was always decent on computers when I was younger, so I was just like, fuck it, I'll set this up and see how it goes, and just started doing it. And I just basically reached out to people, and in MMA, it's probably a lot easier, especially back then, to get people to reply to you who are at a high level in the game compared to other sports. It probably still is now. Like, you can get like a UFC title contender on your podcast, even if your podcast has 2 episodes or whatever. So they were open to kind of doing interviews and things like that, and agreed to go down and do a video with Carl Pendred, and I was going to get a loan of my friend Corey's camera to go do it. But I was out a couple of nights before I was due to go down to SPG to film Call, and a couple of guys I went to school with were there, and I was chatting to them about it and trying to convince them to come down. They were working on films, Gav Fitzgerald and Patrick Timmins-Ward, and I convinced them to come down with me and bring their gear and kind of, you know, make the video about Call Penderhead, and that's pushing it on a little bit. We'd obviously done some really unprofessional interviews before that, some pretty disastrous ones, but we were learning on the job. But once Paddy and Gav came in, the kind of video side of it took obviously way more professionalism on, looked more professional, and kind of taught me kind of, you know, the basics of how to be content or video content creator. But really it was kind of, you know, obviously a bit of luck there, running into them and convincing them, and I think Gav thought it was like pro wrestling and was like, this can't be real, and like that was like, obviously it's kind of hard to believe now when MMA is so big, but people hadn't really heard of MMA, or they'd heard of it as like, oh, cage fighting or human cockfighting or something barbaric, but obviously it's moved on a lot now. But the podcast side of things, obviously Andrew McGahan was involved. I think I told him he should start doing some kind of podcast. I think I'd started to listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't think there were very many MMA podcasts, but just different podcasts back when podcasts are kind of starting out, and like the Joe Rogan Experience and stuff like that. I used to watch live and things like that, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it was kind of easy to get onto people, or easier than other sports to get onto people and, you know, get them as guests on a podcast or a video or whatever. So I think Andrew did sporadically. He did only a handful of, I think it was called the MMA Hangout or the SevereMMA Hangout. And that would kind of, you know, wasn't consistent until you came on board and kind of took the reins, and kind of that's how the podcast side of things really got going. The MMA Hangout was kind of, you know, kind of half-arsed idea that wasn't really put into action properly.
Yeah, I think, you know, Andrew did it once every so often, and I came in and I was like, I'm doing a podcast and I'm doing it every single week. It's going to be coming out at this time every single week. Like, you can either come on and do it with me, or you can keep doing the hangout once every month and I'll get someone else, or I'll do it myself or whatever. And he was like, yeah, and he did it. And that's kind of where it started from. And, you know, I suppose how did it build into the podcast empire? It was just basically, we're on number 400. We just kept doing it.
Empire is a bit of a reach.
Well, you know what? It's fucking, I don't know. I don't know. Is it a bit of a reach? Like, how many other podcasts have not only gone that far, but have like actually like probably made a bit of money out of them, and, you know, they're like, they keep growing and there's people actually wanting to listen to it and all. Like, that's a tough thing to actually do. If you think about it, I saw a thing before that if you get over 25 listens on a podcast that you upload, right, you're in like the top 5 percentile of all podcasts ever. Something like that. Yeah, it's something like that. And now we obviously get a little bit more than 25. We want to put it that way. But yeah, I'm proud of what we have kind of built in terms of the podcast. And you built the website along with Andrew, I suppose, on the way up. And it's been fantastic. It was funny though when you were talking about starting it off. I was talking to a fighter there recently, and they were telling me about, like, you know, people reaching out to him these days to ask for interviews and stuff, and there's loads, and they were like saying, I kind of did 1, I did 2, I did 3, I did 5, and then I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna have to cut this back a little bit now. Whereas when you kind of started doing it, I suppose if anyone reached out to you, I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, there's someone reaching out to me. It was probably the only interview any fighter would do that year. Whereas now they might get fucking, you know, 5 in a week or something like that from every Tom, Dick and Harry. Makes it both better for the fighters, I suppose, to get a lot of people asking them, but also easier for them to like get sick of it and turn people down, and maybe harder for the people trying to start their own shit these days to actually get people on after a certain point in their careers, you know. So I think it's a very different landscape, massively different landscape. Like when myself and Andrew started talking about Irish MMA, I listened to the Co-Main Event podcast, and I was like, we could be the Irish version of that. That's kind of what I had in my head. I didn't want guests, and we've never had a guest, I don't think, in 400 episodes. We've obviously done, you know, guest appearances and specials and stuff like that, but I don't think there's ever been a fighter ever on it. Ian O'Neill is probably the only one who is a professional record, I'd say, who's been on the SevereMMA podcast. So yeah, it's and then, you know, I'm kind of proud of doing that as well, doing it that way. But that was different. There was no one doing that at the time. There was, you know, maybe there was like one podcast out at the time, and like it's funny as well, like the longevity, the 400 episodes and stuff. I was talking to someone recently, and they're saying to me, like, remember, say, a Bamator card or a card, you know, one of the Cage Warriors cards when Pendred was on it or something, and you think of like the people there, not people covering it and people around the scene at that time, and how many of them are actually still there today. And it's funny, it's very few. Like there's almost no one. Like, you think about it, Graeme, when you started, even for the first 4 or 5 years, like the few people that were there and are still doing it are probably yourself. I came on a couple of years later. Like, Andrew doesn't really do it anymore. Some of the other lads are still around. They kind of turn up and they sit around maybe and become as a fan, or they sit in press row and they're not covering it really as much as they used to and stuff. And the likes of, you know, Fergus O'Farrell used to do a good job with Fight Hounds and other places, and I don't think he's doing it anymore. And Fergus done the podcast with Steve as well over in Setanta. They were doing it and they're kind of gone as well. It's changed massively, I think, in the years that we've been doing it. And I'm proud that we're still there, and it's unfortunate that all them lads aren't still there as well, I suppose. But, you know, it's been a fun ride. Let's get into a couple more questions because we spent all day. Can you give a potted history of how each member of the current team became involved in SevereMMA? Well, you know about Graeme anyway. For me, I basically did a couple of articles, then Graeme kept ringing me non-stop for a year until I finally wilted and came over to SevereMMA. Would that be a fair assessment, Graeme? I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, basically, you were kind of unsure about doing it, and I just kept hounding you until you did.
That's really been my MMA story throughout the whole thing. I was like, do you know what? I don't really want to do this, and then people kind of hound me into doing it, and I end up doing it. But yeah, I did a couple of articles over on HOV MMA, it used to be called. I did one about Neil Seary, and I did one about Daniel Cormier. I was doing it for a couple of years, and then I came in and I was doing like do you remember we were doing a picks, like Sheehan versus it was called, and I had Brian Moore on,
yeah.
Carl Pendred, I think, on, and I did a few. I had a good few different names on, I think. So yeah, that was interesting. And then obviously history from there. From the other lads, I know a lot of the lads just kind of said here, like, I'd love to work for SevereMMA, any chance kind of job. That's how Ian kind of got into it. I remember Ian telling me recently, actually, that he sent me like emails and I was replying and I was very blunt, like, don't get into MMA. You could go in, do 100 articles and come back to me or something like that, which was kind of I remember before I used to get emails like weekly asking, how do I become a media member, how do I write for SevereMMA and all. I don't really get them much anymore, if I'm being honest, but I think that's how Ian and Andy both kind of came over for Quail Shed in. Like, we were kind of talking about getting more into Irish MMA, and he was doing good stuff, and I think was it Ian maybe approached him? We approached him anyway, and to do a bit with us. Tia came on and did this kind of same thing with Sean Denny. Sean Denny just kind of like stayed around and eventually kind of morphed his way into it, and he's doing a great job now with all the stuff there. And then Spencer obviously has been with us doing loads of the preview shows and stuff, and I kind of said it to him. I think we were all thinking it with Spencer, like, just come on over, just
you just kind of naturally started appearing in more content.
Yeah, 100%. So, and we've Patrick that takes the photos, and we have Andrew McGann that's done a bit, Harry, the two Harrys, Harry Powell, who does a great job on all the podcasts and has been, that interview we did with Sam Creasy, if people haven't seen that, like, Harry came over because he invited me on his podcast, and he was like, can you do 2 hours? And I didn't know him at the time, and I was like, absolutely fucking not. I was like, I have 50 minutes, I have a hard out, and I got about 20 minutes into the podcast and I was like, oh fuck, I wish I'd said, yeah, I do have 2 hours, because I knew immediately that, like, okay, this is a guy who is like trying to do it in the right way and trying to be, smart about things, but not prickish or anything. And I really, really like that. And from the second I did that podcast, and I was like, I need to get this guy involved with SevereMMA. And it happened not maybe 6 months or a year or whatever afterwards. So yeah, who am I missing? I'm surely missing out someone there, Graeme. Is there anyone I forget?
Jake does a little bit of work for us.
Jake,
Obviously,
yeah.
Fight Talk, UK MMA guy, helps out a little bit.
Does a great job with the graphics. Does a great job.
Yeah,
Jake's very good at the graphics. Yeah, and Andy and Ian and Harry do a great job with the graphics and stuff as well. And the lads running the Instagram as well, Andy and Ian especially, are doing an absolutely fantastic job there. So yeah, we have a solid team going. Like I said it before, Graeme, I think the team we have now is the best team SevereMMA has ever had. Really, I think everyone's pulling in a very good direction. I think there's a lot of talent there and a lot of lads working really hard. Like, when have we had as many breaking news stories? When have we had as many interviews and all of that? And the one thing I love, like, we have an interview with Keith Keogh, who is an amateur fighter who's doing great things, and an interview with Conor McGregor, the most famous fighter in the history of the sport, all in the same place. That's what I love about SevereMMA. When you started off, was that kind of the thing you wanted too? You wanted the starting pros, the amateurs, as well as like the best fighters in the world on the platform?
Well, when I started, there probably wasn't even that many. I think SBG had like 8 pro fighters or something, and Team Rhino might have had like 3 or 4. You know, it was like, you know, nowadays the gyms are full. These were like half empty, small room gyms a lot of the time. So, yeah, it wasn't really, there wasn't really any, like, you know, generations of fighters coming through. It's just the odd fighter here, the odd fighter there. But it's changed so much now. I think it was more just, you know, these guys are good, and let me kind of give them a platform and give people who are fans of MMA a chance to kind of, you know, find out information here. And, you know, obviously I'm very into MMA, and I like to kind of, you know, ask them some questions myself, and you know, find out some answers for myself. And I might as well record it, and, you know, give it a go and see how it goes. And people seem to like it, and you know, the fighters seem to appreciate it, and it just kind of went from there. It just kind of, you know, passion more than anything.
Yeah, it's. That's what you need, though, isn't it? Especially like in this game, and especially if you're going to make a conceited effort to cover everyone, and you know, want to cover someone who's starting off their career as well as we cover the big boys, I suppose. And I'm kind of proud of that. I'm proud that the team we have are doing that as well. So it's very, very good. What's the biggest bold prediction for any year that has come true? I don't know.
Have you got any right? I can't even remember.
Jamal Hill was so close. I got one on Amazon was pretty good last year. I said someone would sign with Amazon.
That's not it. Yeah.
That was a pretty good one.
That's boring.
I'm sure we'll have to go. We'll enter that next week. We'll go back and look. We'll go back and look through them. We've on for Stuart Burns here in the middle is a different sort of one. Should intelligent defense be the only criteria for stoppages, and should officials have a broader description to stop fights where one fighter is clearly hopelessly outclassed? Like the example of Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade. This is an interesting question, isn't it? Because there is that like grey area in refereeing, I suppose, where it's not the time for the referee to stop it, it's the time for the corner to throw in the towel, but the corner never throws in the towel, but because of the intelligent defense thing. So I think it's interesting. Do you think like referees should have the license to like, right, this is reached a point where I need to stop it, and they just stop it there?
I think they already do. They definitely do already have the license, and sometimes we see it, you know, the license used. You just gotta go on common sense and, you know, training and experience for these referees. And, you know, sometimes it's like, obviously at the top level, and these guys have done a lot, you'd expect them to, you know, get it right 99% of the time, and some referees do and some don't, and some go through bad patches, or some referees used to be good and now are bad, or some referees are just bad. But I think that's the same in any sport. Obviously in MMA, it's you know, taking brain damage and stuff like that is obviously a higher risk than in most sports. But I don't think the referees are particularly bad in MMA compared to other sports. You know, if you went through decisions of NFL, NBA, Premier League, Champions League referees, like I don't think they're anywhere near perfect, or even, you know, most of them aren't even competent. So I think in the UFC and the top promotions at the top level, I think the referees are pretty good and they do a pretty good job, and they do use that license. They do use just a bit of common sense sometimes when, you know, maybe somebody is still technically moving when you're saying to move, or, you know, quote, intelligently defending themselves and just enough, but they're taking a bit of a beating, or they have no route to victory, and the fight gets stopped, or they're getting outclassed and the ref just stops the fight. But I think the corner comes into it more when the ref isn't stopping a fight that should be stopped.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the question is about. And I agree with everything you said there. And like, I think for the referees to have that license to use a bit more common sense and like work outside of the written rules, maybe for that sort of thing, I think that would be good. And, you know, I think they do it a bit.
I think they do, and they don't get criticised when they do. I think people understand nearly all the time when they do stop a fight. They're just like, oh, yeah, well, you know, there was no coming back from that. It was a matter of time kind of thing.
Yeah. We're recording this, Graeme, just as Dana White is doing a special announcement. The special announcement is that Ian Gary will be on the John Jones versus Cyril Gane card, but also that on April 8th, Alex Pereira will be fighting Israel Adesanya for the second time, and the co-main event of that card will be Gilbert Burns versus Jorge Masvidal. So that's a pretty good card, isn't it? Looking forward to seeing the two of them.
What about the special announcement?
That's the lads are sending the messages here in the group, and they're giving out about that. But yeah, I like the fact that Burns is absolutely going to destroy Masvidal, and he'll be, you know, probably gone away for another year. So that's good. You know,
it's smart by the UFC though, you know, and Dana, obviously there's a lot of talk about McGregor potentially having a fight booked or doing the Ultimate Fighter, and he's like, oh, special announcement, tune in. Like, he definitely knows exactly what he's doing
100%, there. 100%. What do you think of that idea? There's actually a question here from Christopher as well. What thoughts on Conor versus Tony possibly coaching Duff? I love the idea anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, well, like we talked about it before, saying it would be ideal if he came back against somebody like Tony, but we were probably leaning towards thinking that he wouldn't, just because Tony's coming off a loss and things like that. And but like, yeah, if they do tough, two big personalities, you know, Tony is not gonna, you know, back down. Conor's not gonna back down. It'd be pretty good dynamic, I think, there. But yeah, like when I first heard or saw Conor's tweet or Instagram or whatever it was about it, I thought, I was surprised, but I suppose it kind of does make sense in a way. Give him time and kind of, you know, build up the return. And, you know, obviously for ESPN and UFC, it'd be huge. You know, the Ultimate Fighter, I haven't watched that in a long time. I don't know what the last number season was that I watched, but years and years, it just became so formulaic, and just, you know, sometimes I watch the first episode and then I just can't get into it. But I'd say, you know, the viewership numbers will be huge compared to what they were the last few seasons if they could get to Tony, Conor. Even if they could get, you know, I saw people talking about Masvidal and Conor. That would be very good TV as well.
Yeah, well, obviously Masvidal fighting Burns now, so it could be Tony. Maybe that's the reason why this popped up like that. I think it'd be very good, right? Because you want McGregor in a fight like the Tony Ferguson fight. And that's the fight I've called for a long time, and have stayed by that, wanting that fight for a long time. And this actually, like, gives you a way to have that fight without saying, oh, you're giving McGregor someone, you know, who's at the end of their career and has lost all their last 5 fights or whatever it is. Because we'll have forgotten about that by the time they fight, because people will actually watch Tough and will watch the rivalry. And, you know, it'll be funny because Tony's an absolute weirdo and McGregor will like call him a weirdo and stuff, and there'll be moments from it'll be funny. It might be the most.
I'll definitely be able to make a highlight reel of the season.
Definitely, yeah. Anyway. And it makes for a perfect fight for McGregor and his comeback as well. If they do it, it's really smart. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I know Conor says he's up for it. Like, he feels like the one that wouldn't be up for it if anyone wouldn't be up for it. The fact that he's
up for it, I'm sure Dana White and Pilgrim Studios and ESPN and, you know, everybody involved with the UFC would want to get it done. So, yeah, I don't know how much money he'd be asking or stuff like that. Maybe that'll be the stumbling point. But yeah. all signs point to more likely than not happening, in my opinion, at the moment. But
as long as Conor can stay off that bicycle,
yeah, well, he was off that bicycle earlier by the looks of things. Anyway, like Jesus. Fucking hell,
poor lad. What's the hardest thing about working in MMA media? Christopher says. Graeme, for you, like you've been in the background for most of your time, I suppose, doing your thing, and obviously you came on the podcast and did as well.
I never wanted to be on the podcast. I never wanted to be known. I wanted to be just fucking invisible. But McGahan went off to the Mac Life, and you kind of hounded me into doing the podcast, which I suppose like I had hounded you into coming to SevereMMA, so you kind of got me back in that way.
What is there anything you find hard about it though? Like I've said in the last while, like I've struggled just with like there's just it never ends kind of, and I feel like the last 6 weeks have actually been great because it kind of did end there for a while. You know, there was no MMA for a bit, but
I don't know if this is in my head or it's just like, you know, looking for a justification or a reason, but I think sometimes maybe, I'm not sure if this is it, but maybe having to do the podcast the next day makes me kind of watch the fights in a different way, a less kind of enjoyable way or something, because I'm trying to concentrate on maybe things that I wouldn't if I was just watching it and didn't have to talk about it the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way, especially since I started talking more about judging as well. That's really changed how I watch.
I'm like, sometimes I know you're going to ask me how I scored it, so I'm like, geez, I'll make sure I fucking
better start watching this.
You know, zone in on this. Like it's less relaxed or something.
Yeah, I'd say the same. That's actually a big part of it. Like, I think the hardest thing in an overall sense is like going from a person who like really enjoyed MMA as a fan to not being able to enjoy it in that way. I still enjoy it, and I really enjoy doing the podcast and chatting with you or Ian or Harry or whoever it might be, but like to kind of not be able to sit back and enjoy it and, you know, live or die by a result. And I never really was that sort of fan anyway, to be honest. I always kind of came into it for the love of the sport rather than the love of a fighter. And, you know, some people probably came in for Brock Lesnar or for Ronda or for Conor or for maybe Ian Gary, you know, or whoever it might be. I never, that wasn't me. So I do still miss it a little bit and miss not having that. But yeah, I enjoy it in other ways.
Like, I'm not sure with myself if I'm just kind of trying to like find reasons, or if it's just the fact that I've been watching for so long that you start watching it differently anyway, or
I think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I think also like making picks before fights changes how you does it. It doesn't
for me, no. I do the betting picks as well every week, and it doesn't for me, but I think for a lot of people it does. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, like I probably prefer not to make picks, but obviously like you guys want me to or whatever, so I do. But for the enjoyment of it, I probably would prefer not to, and just, you know, watch it without any. I suppose I don't really care if I get the picks wrong or whatever, but I don't know, it just kind of comes into my head, oh yeah, I picked this guy by whatever, 4th round or whatever, so I'm kind of, you know, okay, let's get this one in the 4th round, even though I don't know why I do that, because I don't actually really care if my picks are wrong.
I'll tell you how much I don't care. I tweeted that Paul Craig would get knocked out by Johnny Walker with North's outstanding hammer fist, right? And he basically did, not necessarily exactly how I was thinking, but he basically did. And I actually forgot I tweeted that 20 minutes beforehand until people started replying, holy shit, I can't believe you did this. And I was like, oh yeah, what did I talk about? And then I looked at it, I was like, oh yeah. So I forget often I've given a different pick on fucking Sherdog than I have on SevereMMA. That's how seriously I take my picks. But when you're betting, it's a little bit different as well. But yeah, no, I've been doing picks for so long as well. I think it's just water off a duck's back. Like if someone says my picks are shit, like yeah, they probably are. Like I don't really care. I love watching the fights, and you know we have to have the fight to find out. So I can give you my pick if you want, but sure, like what's it actually worth at the end of the day? But yeah, that's never really been a big issue for me. Like. I think the hardest thing, like, do you know what as well with MMA, it's 24/7. That's probably the very hardest thing about working in it as well. You kind of have to stay on top of it, and it's harder and harder to do all the time. But anyway, the next question is, what's the best thing about working in MMA media? Like, I think there's lots of great things, to be honest. Like, I just love, my favorite thing is honestly doing podcasts now, just sitting down here, chatting with you, chatting with Harry, chatting with Ian, whoever I might be chatting with. Like I interviewed Will Fleury there last week, and you know, hopefully be going up and covering the, you know, the Bellator event coming up. Like those events as well, they're a fucking pain in the hole to get to Dublin and to pay for hotels, and you know, rush everything in terms of the work I have to do before I get there. But when I get there, it's fucking great. Like turning up for the weigh-ins and just like sitting down and having a chat with, you know, Jude Samuel, or having a chat with, you know, one of the fighters that are there, or, you know, Mike Mazzulli, or, and, you know, going on fight night, meeting yourself and talking to, you know, being Cartilage, or talking to Quailshire, talking to whoever it might be for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I love that. There's a bit of a camaraderie in it as well. There's, you know, you meet someone from MMA and, you know, you're kind of like, oh, it's one of us, you know, and I've always enjoyed that. But yeah, I love working in MMA. And
I definitely agree that the events are probably the best part of it. Like the big Irish MMA events in Ireland, and when you know, obviously when Conor was, you know, making his way through the UFC, or that Dave Hill or Bushinger, or, you know, Ian Gary making his UFC debut, or Reese making the UFC debut, or Siri in the UFC, or Paddy Hoolan's, you know, UFC Dublin. Moments like that and events like that are probably the best part of Irish MMA media, and being so close to it. And, you know, obviously over the years, like, you know, being in the locker rooms and stuff like that before big fights, and seeing how fighters are when the cameras are off and when they're kind of, you know, in the moments before a fight and stuff like that, is always very interesting as well. So that's probably something that I'm very lucky to have been able to do. But yeah, I think the whole event experience is definitely the best part of it.
Do you know what I find very interesting as well? And I've been wanting to say this to you, and I said it on another podcast that'll probably be out next week, but I don't know if you saw last week, Josh Thompson tweeted something about fighters should do interviews with other fighters and something. But he made this point: fighters should do interviews with other fighters because, you know, they know what they're going through and they'll get better things out of them and stuff. And it's interesting. I saw a few media members get mad over it, and I was talking to Ian about it as well, and he wasn't too happy with it. And I was kind of thinking, like, Josh Thompson is right in the American scene, I think, but we're so lucky in Ireland that when we interview fighters, we know them and they know us. Like, Will Fleury doesn't interview with me. He knows I'm not going to fuck him over and ask him like something stupid or get some clickbait thing, you know, try to get some clickbait thing out of him. You know, I asked him about Jake Paul in that interview because he had mentioned Jake Paul and we kind of laughed it off and said it was bullshit. And like, I think but the fact like that, I've probably met Will Fleury 10 times in my life, and I've chatted to him a few times, or, you know, you do an interview with, say, a Franz Malambo, or even Conor, who I've only spoken to like 3 times in my life, but he knows you know, for years, and you've been doing the podcast with me, and he knows I'm on SevereMMA. When you talk, it's normal. These people know you, they know each other. There's a certain level of respect that myself, for you, or, you know, have earned over the years, but that the likes of Ian and Andy and Harry and others are earning now as well. That makes it a lot different, I think, than now. Obviously, you know, the likes of Luke Thomas and the likes of Ariel and other people have it with all or most fighters, but I think the American fighters don't have that kind of close-knit community, and even if it's not a respect per se in terms of I respect your work and all that, they know who you are and they know that you know what you're fucking talking about, and you're not just some lad with a fucking Instagram page.
It's definitely, it's a level of comfortable, you know, being comfortable with somebody. Sometimes you do see it with American fighters, if like a guy's interviewing somebody and he, you know, the gym that the guy's from is like near where he lives, or he's been down there a few times, you can see that they kind of have a rapport and that it's more kind of laid back and more open, and that's just a natural thing. And when you've been, like, we've been around for years, with the scene kind of in Ireland has grown and exploded, and the ups and the downs, and, you know, we've kind of been on the journey with these guys in a lot of ways. Like, and when I was doing the 10-year, the Patreon series there last year or whatever it was, a lot of guys said that it feels like, you know, the journey of Irish MMA is everything's connected. Like, everybody, it's such a small scene, it's such a small island, you know, especially at the start, that, you know, everybody's close, you know, everybody, you know, even the gyms, they might have some rivalries and stuff, but if something happens or somebody, you know, needs something, they'll all come together, and it's a close-knit scene in a lot of ways, even though obviously there's a lot of, you know, shit talking and, you know, normal stuff going on, stuff like that, and rivalries and all that stuff. That's good and that's healthy and that's normal. But yeah, I think in terms of what Josh Thompson was saying, in fighters interviewing fighters, yeah, absolutely. But there isn't that many fighters doing, you know, podcasts, really. Like, it's definitely grown in the last few years, but fighters, you were getting fighters on doing interview type podcasts, there isn't that many. Obviously, Chael, you know, is one of the popular ones. He's kind of just, you know, giving hot takes by himself most of the time, and there isn't really enough opportunities if you're just doing interviews with if you're just being interviewed by fighters and ignoring media. I think maybe some people took it the wrong way from Josh Thompson because he's kind of had a go at a nonsensical go at MMA media before on Twitter. So maybe if he hadn't have said that, people would have taken it a bit more kind of level-headedly.
Indeed. Question from Aidan. What's more certain, Limerick winning the Liam McCarthy or McGregor winning his comeback match?
Limerick's still good, are they? I don't know.
Yeah, we've won 4 of the last 5 All-Irelands. So
is your man the Irish Sheik? Is he still there? Is he?
Great. Don't be one of those people. It's an amateur sport.
I know nothing about it. I just remember you being mad about it, defending it in the group, but I know nothing about it.
No, we're the best. Yeah, Dublin are the ones who get all the money. We want to break it down like that, but we won't go into that. But yeah, look, it's great. Limerick, the 4 in a row is coming this year, and hopefully the 5 in a row the year after.
What did Dublin do in the GAA? Was it 5 in a row or 6 in a row?
They won like 9 out of 10, didn't they, or something? Or 10 out of 11?
Or in a row, was it 5 or?
Oh, they did more. I think 7. I think.
Oh, was it? I don't think it was that many, was it? I don't know. I have no idea. Sorry.
It was at least 6 anyway. Yeah, I think it was 7. I think it was 7, but I can't remember. I wouldn't like football at that time got so boring.
Unless Kerry and Dublin are playing, I don't care.
Yeah, Kerry. No, that could be the rivalry coming back now again because Kerry won it last year, and Kerry have this guy David Clifford. He's unbelievable, like the greatest footballer to ever play the game. This guy, and like I remember, I went to college with a lot of Kerry lads, and they were talking about David Clifford when he was like 12 years of age. Like it's mad. Like this guy, he's a phenom. Like he's the Messi of Gaelic football. He is unbelievable. If you ever
if it was any use, he'd be playing soccer, huh?
Yeah, he could be. The Americans always go on about like, oh, if we'd our best athletes, we'd be the best in the world in soccer. Like the amount of people playing Gaelic football now and hurling who are unbelievable athletes who could thrive in other sports.
Being an athlete, like there's a lot of people who don't like. Messi's not exactly an athlete, is he? Like obviously he is an athlete, but compared to an NFL guy, he's not in the same realm.
Yeah, but a guy like fucking Kyle Hayes or a guy like, a lot of that Dublin team, they could have played fucking rugby for Ireland if they had gone that way. These are unlike a lot of the rugby players or whatever. There's a lot of spread in the sports here, and it's like America. I feel like they're the only ones in the world that don't have it.
Sure. Do you remember Jason Sherlock? And there was like talk of him like being scouted by Premier League teams and like. There was talk about him going for a trial with Liverpool and all this stuff years and years ago. I don't know why I remember that. Jail, yeah.
Great man. Anyway, Sean Denny, is Bloody Elbow departing its current guys a benefit to the UFC with one less outlet questioning them? For the UFC, the UFC are probably licking their lips. So I don't know if you've seen this, Graeme, or people listening. Kid Nate from Bloody Elbow, who's running the show over there, has been let go, and now I'm not sure if everyone has been let go, but I think most of the people have been let go, and Vox Media, who run Bloody Elbow, MMA Mania and MMA Fighting, if I'm not mistaken, are getting rid of Bloody Elbow. Zane Simon, who works for Bloody Elbow, tweeted recently that they're going to try to keep it going and run it independently, which I absolutely hope they will, but it's a massive blow for them. And like, look, Bloody Elbow is not everyone's cup of tea, but I think everyone could agree that they ask important questions. They do, the most hard-hitting journalism, I suppose, in MMA, and maybe they go over the top sometimes, but like, there's not a lot of people even getting close to that line in MMA media, so they're a massive loss and definitely a benefit for the UFC, especially with, say, the likes of John Nash, who's been working for them for a long time. And all the reporting he has done on the lawsuits and, the Ali Act and all of that stuff. And then I obviously feel very sorry for everyone knows I'm massive friends with Stephanie Haynes Crooklyn over there for years. And I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for her. And I'm absolutely devastated for her and some of the other people as well losing their jobs in the media sphere. Or, maybe, hopefully they don't. Hopefully they can keep it going. But I think it's a massive blow for MMA. What did you think of that news, Graeme?
Yeah. I literally didn't even know that until you started talking about it there. There's a lot of MMA websites now, but Bloody Elbow's been around a long time, and it's one that I respect. And it's sad. You know, Fox, obviously, from their point of view, it's probably a purely business decision, but I really do hope, like you said, that they can, Bloody Elbow team can, you know, go back to how it was before they were bought by Vox and have it kind of, you know, host it themselves and run it themselves and keep it going, because, you know, in MMA, there's a lot of, you know, fan pages, Instagrams, TikToks, and YouTube videos with fake news. And as you said, these guys are actually putting in investigative work and, you know, allowing people who are willing to put in the work, the pay and the space to actually go and do some non-easy, you know, sitting in your chair at home work, going out and actually, you know, uncovering some facts. And maybe, as you said, maybe some people have a problem with how they went about it or some of their reporting or whatever. But I don't think, you know, a website of when you're trying to get into hard hitting issues, maybe you're going to make a few mistakes and things like that. But besides that, I think they've been, you know, one of the kind of pillars in terms of MMA media, and it definitely would be really sad if they disappeared. But I'm sure they can work something out and, you know, maybe not keep the whole team together, but keep the key figures there and get their own hosting. And, you know, depending on what kind of deal, you know, if Vox would let them, I don't know. Hopefully Vox would just be sound about it and let them walk off and do it. But I'm not sure what the legal situation would be there. I don't know if you know anything about that. But
I don't know.
Hopefully, yeah. If they're free to walk away and do it themselves, I'm sure it wouldn't be too difficult to keep it going with maybe you know, obviously they're keeping the same big team that they have at the moment. Probably isn't feasible without Vox. But yeah, I think. It would definitely be sad to see them go, but unless there's some kind of legal problems with continuing, you know, maybe they could change the name, but that would be unfortunate as well.
100%. Next question here from over on Instagram, DH Newman. If McGregor does tough, do you think any Irish fighters will be in the tough house? I know there was rumours of two. One of them I thought is not happening now. Maybe, you know, maybe the other will. And this was before McGregor, so maybe now that McGregor is there, like, you know,
I think they've already gone to the latter stages of casting. But, you know, maybe they could change it up if Conor
goes here.
Conor's deal was, I want this guy or I want this guy, you know. I could see that being switched around pretty quickly.
Like, there are a number of guys out there who you think, like, you know, Lee Hammond, depending on what weight class it is, he's talked about going to the UFC. I know Kiefer Crosby, maybe. I know he's fighting Alex Oliveira, and hopefully with that win he'll be in there. But there's probably a lot of guys, you know. Obviously John Kavanagh was talking about Franz Malambo and was kind of gave away that he's going to PFL, so maybe he's not going to be one of them. But there's a lot of lads in SPG right now who are, I suppose, there'd be a lot of lads are in Bellator, but a lot of lads kind of coming up and fighting around the place as well. So it'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see who's out of contract, who's available, who's around, who he'd like to get, I suppose, in the house with him. Because, like, if they're doing that too, McGregor's going to use that as a bit of a camp. And you know him, he always likes to have his people with him. And, you know, it'll be interesting. So I'll wait and see in that one, I suppose. We'll run through a few more of these quickly here. Is the European scene better than the American scene locally? I find that I wouldn't know how to answer that because we don't see the American scene.
It's hard to know. Like, obviously we're more invested in it, so we know more about these guys. We followed their journeys, some of them anyway, and compared to if we just throw on a random like Canadian show or American show, we might not have heard of any of the guys on the kind of up and coming shows. So yeah, it's a very difficult one to ask, but the level of some of the high level European shows is really, really good. It's streets ahead of what it was 10, 15 years ago when I started following the scene. Yeah.
Where are you going for your summer holidays? I'm going to Dublin probably. Where are you going, Graeme? You were just in Brazil.
Summer holidays, yeah. I was over in the Brazilian summer there recently.
Is Brazil on is Brazil's the opposite to us, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so I'm just back from the summer into the cold, so I'm adjusted again. But for the summer, I'm not sure. Stay tuned.
You're going to Amsterdam like tomorrow or something, aren't you?
I'm going to Amsterdam tomorrow just for 2 days. But
never in fucking Ireland. Fuck's sake.
Yeah, you know, get away while you can, you know.
When will Arsenal do an Arsenal? Okay, we'll answer this with a yes or no. Will Arsenal do an Arsenal, Graeme? Do you think they'll win the Premier League?
It all depends on Man City. I think if Man City put pressure on Arsenal, put 8-10 wins together in a row like they have done in previous 3 or 4 or 5 seasons, I think Arsenal likely would crumble. But if they don't have any pressure put on them, they're just gonna win the league.
Indeed.
So I think they will do an Arsenal if the correct, or if anywhere near substantial amount of pressure is put on them. There's still a long way to go. Obviously, they're strengthening with people like Trossard and stuff like that. But you know, a couple of injuries. Are they strengthening with
Trossard?
Well, their squad anyway. You know, you know, I wouldn't be sure about a couple of their squad players if there was to be injuries to key people, but. You know, if they keep winning and Man City keep struggling and Liverpool are obviously struggling and Man United are doing well, but I don't think they're much of a threat. And yeah, will they do an Arsenal? I think it just all depends on Man City and the way it's going for Man City. I don't think they're going to put any pressure on. I know in the past they've done it before, you know, against Liverpool, and in those seasons when they got 90 points, they put together like 12 wins in a row, 14 wins in a row, things like that. But the way they're playing at the moment, I don't see it.
I think Man City will do it. I think they'll come back and win it.
They want to get going pretty quickly, you know.
They will. Is there any demand for the Shawnee versus Graeme debate podcast? Well, like if you give us something to debate over, anyway, that's kind of what it is. The Liverpool and Man United one we did was basically that. That got hot and heavy there for a while, a couple of weeks ago. So if there's another one out there, absolutely, we're always here to.
We need to do a part 2 when Liverpool are back and Man United are playing shit. So I can have
I got in there at the sweet spot there before we fucking lost. It was brilliant. But anyway, what's better, Francis? What's better for Francis? Multiple little easy purses or one big one? Could he go on a fight circus and fight a 5 on 100,000k every 2 weeks and earn more cumulatively? Maybe he could, but like, who's going to pay him that? Who's going to fucking pay him that? How's that going to be sustainable? Like his best case scenario. Someone tweeted me last week on the Q&A and they said, if he got a deal with Showtime to fight, say, Deontay Wilder, I think the name was, get like 10 million out of that. No, but 1 second. Box Deontay Wilder, sorry. Was that what the problem you had there was? Or was there something else? Anyway, and didn't go to Bellator because they're all under the same guys or whatever. That to me looks like a fucking ideal situation for Francis, but I don't know. What do you think? Is there any? We've talked about this ad nauseum at this stage, but
I don't think Tyson Fury actually wants to fight Ngannou, but he has brought it up a couple of times, trying to just negotiate on other fights. I think, or other bouts. I think, but for Francis, I think it would be ideal to go in there against either Joshua or Fury, just the biggest name he could find in boxing. And obviously Deontay Wilder is a big name, but he's just on that tier below and has knockout power. And I think if he loses, if Francis went down and lost to Tyson Fury, people would be like, okay. But if he's going in there against somebody on the slightly lower level and he gets destroyed in boxing, which is
that's worst case scenario.
That's the worst. So I think either go in there against one of the very best, or stick to. I prefer you stick to MMA anyway. Like you know what I mean. These boxing is just, I don't know what's going on with boxing these days. Boxing is a mad sport these days. It's changed completely. But people seem to be very interested in these kind of crossover bouts. But I feel
like sometimes like MMA.
David Hayes still planning that November 2018 transition to MMA. He could fight Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, I'd watch that. So
I think he went in the gym a couple of times and he never talked about it again.
James Haskell versus David Hay. Let's get that one going. Betway fan, what Irish fighters look out for in the IMAFs next month? This question is sponsored by the Ultra Angle. So here is the list: Sarah Elliott, Sheridan, the juniors first, Owen, Mass, Oliver, Jake, and guy who a lot of people talk about. He's very, very good. Marco, Cardillo, Mohammed, Av Tarhanov, who I was talking to Will Fleury last week, and he was saying this guy is a fucking beast, and I know the lads think he's a beast as well. And in the seniors, Lisa Houston, Megan Hamill, Ava Cruz, Carrie-Ann Vernon, Ronan Deegan, Jordan Bradshaw, Danny Hartwell. So Jordan Bradshaw, I think, is definitely a standout. He was got a few votes last year for our amateur of the year, but I think all of them have a chance there as well. I think Ava Cruz, she's someone I find out of SBG who, you know, I've seen her fight a couple of times, and you know, she looks like she could be one to keep an eye on too over the next while. But all the names I kind of called out there, I think it's good to keep an eye. You never know as well. Like someone might have had a fight in the last 3 months. It could be totally different.
Some people turn a corner really quick. Like Rhys McKee, like he was just in my opinion, like from what this could be totally wrong, and other people could have seen like great potential in him already. But in his first couple of amateur fights that I saw, maybe when he was making his amateur debut or fighting the second or third fight, he didn't look like, you know, he had all this potential. He didn't look like he had big power. He just looked like he was a young fighter kind of finding his way. And that's how it starts for a lot of these guys. You know, a lot of these guys, if you see one of their amateur, even UFC champions, if you see one of their first amateur fights and you see them now, it's like a completely different person in every way. So, you know, it's just great experience for these guys. But I wouldn't be confident in picking anybody out particularly at such a young early stage of their career, because it's all about learning at the moment. They will, by the time they turn professional, they will more than likely be absolutely completely different in nearly every way than they are now.
100%. CJ Carp over on Patreon asks, with UFC Ireland being topical, who's the next breakthrough Irish fighter to the UFC? It has to be Paul Hughes, doesn't it? Like, considering Reese is on the Irish card now, Paul hasn't been announced.
And the light heavyweight, or not the light heavyweight, the lightweight Cage Warriors title fight got announced, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
And it wasn't Paul Hughes, so you know, who are they going to have him fight at 45? If they, you know, if he wasn't going to the UFC, would they have, or if he wasn't kind of nearly guaranteed, or they weren't confident that he's going to the UFC, would they have waited on that title shot announcement for 155? I think they probably would have. I think they're probably pretty confident that Paul Hughes will be in the UFC. I don't have no inside information on that or anything, but
they have a lot of cards
the performances he's been putting on. Yeah, you know, exciting guy. You know, Irish doesn't hurt either, and Cage Warriors champion in such a brilliant performance in his last fight. I think it'd be very, very harsh if he wasn't signed to the UFC.
100%. I look, the other ones are obviously, look, if Rhys McKee wins the title shot there again and puts on another performance like he put on the last time, I think he'll get signed. Look, Bukowskis, I think, is back in already. I think Rhys will be as well. Two I mentioned earlier as well. If Kiefer Crosby beats Alex Oliveira, I think he'll be in the UFC. He has to be. And Lee Hammond is so much better than the vast majority of people getting in at his level of experience through the Contender Series. Now, this guy is a phenomenal fighter. Obviously, you know, he's a long way to go still in terms of, like, obviously only 5-6 fights into his career, and he won our emerging prospect this year. But I think, like, we know the relationship that his gym has with Bellator. If I'm the UFC, I'm like, let's fucking snap him up quick before he goes into Bellator and signs a contract. But Lee's been very smart, I think, fighting one fight here, one fight there, one fight everywhere, and that's the job. That's the fucking way to do it. And he'd be another guy. But there's probably a good few guys like on the brink right now. Like James Sheehan is on the brink of probably a title shot if he beats Ben Elliott here. Caelan Loughran is on the brink. If he wins a title, anyone who wins a Cage Warriors title, they're on the brink of getting there. Danny McCormack as well. If she wins
before you
go on.
Yeah, before you go on, Lee Hammond, do you think the fact that he doesn't really do interviews, that people don't really know him, hurts him in terms of being talked about for these kind of things?
Let's do it. I'll interview him. I don't interview many people. I only interview very, very special people. Lee Hammond, come on, someone listening to this, clip this out. I'd love to get Lee Hammond on to talk to him. We'll get him to the UFC. I'll fucking tag Sean Shelby. Dana White follows me. I'll DM it to him, the whole lot. We'll get Lee Hammond into the UFC. What do you think, Graeme? Will we do it?
Yeah, but how much do you think it actually, you know, affects? Like, do you think if he had put himself out there more, he'd be at least fighting on bigger shows, or, you know, having calls for the UFC? Or do you think like I think, a couple more fights the way he's doing it, one deal fights is probably the way to go, and not to rush it. He's been around a long time as an amateur, but he's young enough as a pro, like, and it is a little bit different, and maybe, giving himself a little bit more time would be probably ideal in my opinion. But in terms of the media side of things, and I think he did one interview in the Mac Mansion with PC for SevereMMA, and I think that's probably it.
Yeah. Do you know, like, and I was talking to him the last day. It's not like he can't speak well, or it's not like he's he's funny, and you probably spoke to him way more than I spoke to him. I only spoke to him once or twice ever, but like, absolutely. And but like as well, if he did an interview with me or you or the lads over in the Old Triangle, we're not going to fucking, he's not to worry about, like, we're not going to fucking take the piss, or we're not going to be pricks or ask him stupid questions or anything like that. And that is like, that is...
I can kind of understand it though, because like, 100%. Even when I was talking about it earlier, like, I didn't want to be, doing a podcast. I don't want to be, on camera. It's just kind of, it is a strange thing. Like, I know we just expect it from fighters because like, it's their brand, their prize fighters.
100%.
You need to make yourself an entity, you need to make yourself cared about either way or whatever, but it is, at the end of the day, up until recent years anyway, a strange thing to be, plastering yourself all over the internet and stuff like that.
But on the other side of what you were talking about there is like, I think if Lee Hammond wanted to be at a big organisation, say a Bellator or a PFL, I think he could probably be there right now. I think it's fully by design. I think he wants to, and he said this, he's put out on Instagram, I want to get to the UFC, and I think the way he's doing it is very, very good. If he put on a few interviews and said a bit of stuff and came out there and said that, like, even if it's just like, all these guys are taking their steps to go their way, and I respect them all, every single one of them, but I want to go my way, and my way is to the UFC, and my way is to the top of the UFC, even if it isn't as braggadocious as that. I think that'd definitely be a benefit, and I think people would like that as well. And I think, look, the fact that he hasn't really done any interviews is probably a plus point, because when he does his first one, it'll be like, oh, we're finally hearing from Lee Hammond, and it'll be great, because like, he's such a good fighter and all that. So maybe, we'll reach out to him. Give him a ring, Graeme. Said Shawnee Podcast wants interview. And I know he loved the live fucking weigh-ins we did the last time as well. He enjoyed him. So I'll get him on the live weigh-ins at Bellator next time. That's what we do. But anyway, come on, we have a few more questions. What Irish fighters do you expect to see in PFL?
Before you go on, do you remember those impression interviews of Andrew McGahan that he did?
Yes, vaguely, yeah.
Golden. Only SevereMMA OG fans will remember that.
Yeah. Remember my impressions of Andrew McGahan, the interviews that used to be around in the fucking SevereMMA WhatsApp groups and stuff. Do you remember that? Or it wasn't an impression of Andrew McGahan necessarily, but it was me voicing over it. This was a long time ago. This was a long time ago. But there used to be some fun stuff going around, right? But anyway, last couple here. Any truth in Bigfoot Silva heading to Dana White's Slap League? Oh God, I fucking hope not. But with him, it wouldn't.
He could bring I don't know much about slapping, but those jaw movements that Bigfoot does before fights, they could be revolutionary in the The jaw game, the
big
jaw tightness. I don't know. I know nothing about slapping. It's just stupidest thing ever.
It is.
Brain damage league.
Yeah. Our guy Ben Davis, would Gilbert Burns go good on a sandwich? He's a bit meaty, all right. So I say he probably would. Which fighters would you like to be stranded with on a desert island? What do you think, Graeme? Anyone you'd like to be stranded on a desert island with?
Who's gonna do all the work for me and catch all the fish and feed me and
Jim Miller?
Kill animals and stuff.
Jim Miller. Frank Mir, they need
Chad Mendes goes out killing shit, doesn't he?
Chad Mendes is a good answer, yeah. We'll go with Chad Mendes. I'll get to number 4 is just Meatball. Yeah, I like a meatball. Number 3, did you watch The Banshees of Inisherin? Have you seen that, Graeme?
No, I haven't actually seen it yet.
One of the best films I've ever seen.
I've heard mixed reviews.
Brilliant. It's absolutely fucking brilliant. Brilliant. You have to go into it with the right idea, though, that this, and maybe for you, maybe you won't get it because, you're a Dublin city slicker, but this is like a West of Ireland feud between two neighbours kind of a job, and it's like, it might seem a bit far-fetched to some people, but this could actually fucking happen in my part of the world. So I absolutely
do they have Kerry accents like Awaru?
No, they're not from Kerry. They're in the Aran Islands. I don't know what they sound like. But they don't talk in Irish though. That's the only thing. But sure, like everyone in it is Irish and they have Irish accents on them and all. So I'd rather them keep their own Irish accents than put on like fake ones and be weird.
Sure, nobody would understand them if they were talking like cultures anyway. So.
But it's
funny when people talk about the Irish accent like Americans and stuff. It's like there's so many different accents in Ireland.
I wonder, do people like, can they tell the difference between me and you, our accents?
Surely, come on.
Yeah.
Like if you speak to a Kerry, if people have never heard a Kerry man talk, type in Kerry farmer sheep or something into
YouTube. Didn't shaper all over the place. They'd never get away from it. They're all shaper all over the place. Yeah, they couldn't get him in now. They were struck out at night, sure. Jesus.
My grandmother was from Kerry, and sometimes I go down with her when I was a kid and stuff, and sometimes she'd go down by herself for a few weeks, and when she'd come back to Dublin, she'd be speaking like with a heavy Kerry accent for a few days. You wouldn't even understand what she was saying.
I'll tell you this. I was actually there the other day, about 15 minutes from the Kerry border, so very close. Like I'm miles away from Limerick City, and I went down to my friend's house in Kerry a few years ago, and his uncle came in, and like he's like a farmer from like lives 10 miles away from anyone else, and genuinely I couldn't understand a word he was saying. It's such a strong Kerry accent. I was like, what?
Especially when they speak to each other and they speak fast. Oh, it's like, oh my God.
Like double Dutch or something. But they're great people down in Kerry. Great people. Some lovely people.
Salt of the earth
people. Have we any other questions? I think that's it for the questions. But Graeme, we have someone actually asked us as well for our champions next year, but I actually have she and Joe over in Turdog out with that right now, so you can go over and listen to that there for that. We better talk a bit about MMA, I suppose, before we go on. Fedor against Bador next week. Ryan Bador against Fedor Emelianenko for the second time. The last time Bador knocked him out in 45 seconds. Thoughts, Graeme? And are you liking this fight? Fedor's last ever fight, allegedly.
The last ever fight again. Am I liking this fight? No, not particularly. You know, we talk about MMA and people should retire all the time. It would have been nice to see a few of these guys retire. I hope it isn't a bad one for Fedor. It'd be nice to see him get a win and retire, but that's fairy tale stuff in MMA. If he wins, he'll probably be, back in there as quick as he can. I don't know how to feel about this. Hopefully it isn't a really sad one, like, maybe not as bad as the Shogun one because he was fighting a no-name, but yeah, I hope it doesn't end badly for Fedor again, but it probably will.
Almost certainly will, I think. Yeah.
He does have big power himself, and Bader, somebody's probably getting knocked out, but I think 90% the likelihood is probably Fedor.
Yeah, I think if you got knocked out by someone when you were like 43, when you're 45, you're probably doubly as likely to get knocked out by him, especially if it was in 45 seconds the last time. So yeah, the middleweight championship is also on the line. Johnny Eblen is taking on Anatoly Tokov. Very interesting fight, this one. I watched a good bit of this before. I'm doing a preview for Sherdog, which will be out during the week. Like, Tokov is out of Fedor's camp. He can wrestle, he can strike, he can do it all. And Johnny Eblen, like, everyone might think after watching the Mousasi fight, he's just a wrestler, takes people down for 25 minutes. But his fights before that, he was actually boxing with guys, and he knocked a couple of guys out in his big power. So this could be a very, very good fight. I think I'm going to pick Tokov, to be honest, even though Eblen is up there with could be the best middleweight in the world right now. I think he beat both of the lads fighting for the UFC title, but Tokov is probably better than the two of them as well. He could be better than the two of them. It's a very interesting matchup. There's other fights on as well. Sabo Homasi against Brennan Ward should be a bit of a banger there. Henry Corrales is fighting Ahmed Magomedov, who's undefeated Steve Murray fighting undefeated Ali Isaev, the former PFL champion, coming over to Bellator, taking on Murray, who is like a 6'7", 6'8" giant of a heavyweight and is very good. I think the winner of that will fight Ryan Bader if he beats Fedor. Your guy Darian Caldwell is in this card as well against Nikita Mikhailov in a very high level fight between Lorenz Larkin and Mohamed Berkamov as well, which could have title implications at 170 with that title on the line.
Or Lorenz Larkin just stand there and do nothing.
Yeah. That could also happen as well. So, pretty good card. There's I think there's a UFC card as well. Like, does anyone give a shit about this UFC card?
Derek Lewis gives a shit.
Derek Lewis, yeah, it's on. It's fucking 6:00 in the morning over here. I'm like, keep that. Derek Lewis fighting Sergey Spivak. I forget who he is, to be honest. And there's loads of lads who I've never heard of on the rest of the card. Da Jung Wong and Devin Clark. I'd say someone will probably get knocked out maybe in that. And then there's other people, you know? Congratulations to him. Duo Ho Choi. Is that the Korean Superboy? Is he back?
Yeah, Kyle Nelson.
Yeah,
he's fighting Kyle Nelson.
This is supposed to be on in Korea, and the Korean Zombie fell out of the card, so they didn't bother having it on in Korea, and it's just a load of Korean fighters, and the roads to the UFC Korea and stuff, and there's like 4 of them in the middle of this card. At fucking 6:00 at 6:00 in the morning, I'm like, nah, you know what? No, you can hold on to that card and you can enjoy it, and I won't be watching it. So we'll be back here. Well, I probably will be watching it, but we'll be back here next week to talk about that and all that stuff.
Sean will definitely be watching it.
Probably, yeah. Jeez, 6:00 is a tough spot for me though.
You can just watch it in the morning, fast forward past all the shite talk from the king of snot rockets.
What time are we going to do the podcast in? Because, like, you know, when do I sleep?
Sure, we'll figure it out at some stage.
Okay, all right. I suppose that's a conversation.
That see you next Tuesday, Monday, Sunday thing might have to come into effect for it.
It actually might, yeah. Next week's podcast might actually be on Tuesday, so we'll put a pin on that and we'll see it. But that's it. We leave it there for another week. 400 episodes. Thanks to everyone. We couldn't have done it without you. Well, we could have done it without you, to be honest, but it was kind of better to have people listening. Otherwise, it's just us talking into a fucking void for
400 not out. Is that a cricket thing?
It is, yeah.
Or did I make that
Brian Charles Lara.
Brian Lara.
Yeah, the only one.
That first?
No, why to watch an Antigua? Yeah. I was watching that. I watched every single second of that Brian Charles Lara 400. I used to love cricket. You know that?
Really? Yeah. No, I never got cricket. I don't know.
Loved it.
I don't know.
But it's just so time.
What other kind of niche sports?
Kabaddi. Everyone knew I loved Kabaddi there for a while, but then it went off Sky and I couldn't watch it anymore.
What about snooker or pool or darts?
Snooker's just so fucking boring. It's just, I like playing.
It can be fun when Ronnie's around. Ronnie O'Sullivan's around at his argumentative best.
The one thing I don't mind darts at times, but darts just never ends. It's on all year, and it's fucking. It goes like the World Championships goes on for like a month, and I'm like, can this just fucking end?
If it's a final or something, and I see it on, I'll tune in. I used to watch it a little bit more, but. The
final of everything is good.
If I'm not busy and there's nothing else on, I'll watch it. But if there's a final on and I happen to see it on, I'll watch it. Or if I see people like Ian Dean or whatever talking about it on Twitter, I might tune in. But as you said, there's a lot of it on, and I used to kind of know the main contenders, but they seem to change really quickly, and I don't even know who people are and how good people are and things like that anymore.
I remember,
but it can be very entertaining, and I do enjoy the kind of. The mentalness of the crowd. It's always funny. I remember
my father's always watching it. I was watching it one year, and there was this lad Rob Cross who came up, and he was like fucking unbelievable. He was just like beating people, and he came out of nowhere. And then I was like, I'm backing this lad for the World Championship, and he was like, I think it was like 20-1, maybe 25-1. And I don't know, I put like a fucking 5 each way or a tenner on him or something, but I don't know. He won it. He ended up winning it anyway, right? But I remember I was above in Cork. It was at Christmas time, and he was in the semi-final against Van Gerwen, if I'm not mistaken. And myself and 3 of my friends were watching it in this bar, and we were going fucking apoplectic watching this fucking darts match, just jumping up, and I was like, yes, I'm gonna win like fucking 150 euro or 200 quid around and this. And funny enough, do you know who walked into the bar? Your man, Gary Spike O'Sullivan, do you know him, the boxer? He was there, and he's a real sound lad. Everyone was taking pictures with him and everything. Really, really nice lad, but going absolutely mad. Do you know what, as well though, right? Any sport that you get on like the final or the end of it, you can watch like the last hour of it. Brilliant.
Golf is great on the last. If there's like a fucking major tournament,
brilliant.
And there's like a few
the last 8 holes on a Sunday. Brilliant.
And it's close, and there's like, if you know, I don't know the name of courses, but there's like
Augusta.
Danger holes coming up and things like, it's good. That's great crack.
Amen corner, or even like I fucking hate
Formula 1 when there's something on the line. When really, really good.
The one a few of the sports I hate, Speedway. Remember that shit? I hate that. It's like,
used to always be on Sky Sports, looking out.
Always. Yeah. I always loved Formula One, and then like it kind of fell out of it. Got boring for a while, and then Drive to Survive came, and then it got really fun again. And
the Sky Sports love in for Lewis Hamilton, and
I hate
just
Lewis
really
so
annoying. Like, and I don't know, people love Lewis Hamilton, but like every time he talks, I just get this fake feeling of like I don't believe a word he's saying. Like, and
we're usually on the opposite sides of fandom in sports, but I think with Formula One we're both like anti-Lewis, pro-Max, and that's great. You know, it's good to have something. It's good to have. What about rugby? Are you talking about rugby these days? Are you watching it? Are you?
Yeah, like if there's a Ireland game on, a big game on, I'll watch it. But my dad is massive into rugby, and like I played rugby in school because you're kind of forced to in school and stuff. But I wasn't as big into it as some of the my friends in school and things like that. My dad, but if there's a big game on, if there's a Leinster, Munster, Ulster having a big game in the Champions Cup and there's nothing else on, I'll watch that. But other sports will probably take priority. But if Ireland are playing the All Blacks or Ireland are playing the World Cup, I'd definitely be watching. Or a big Six Nations game against England or France or something like that, I'd definitely be watching as well.
I used to watch rugby a good bit when I was younger. There was a friend of mine came over from New Zealand, and he was in school, and he was a really good rugby player, and I used to be kind of talking to him about rugby, and I started watching rugby just, to have a chat and stuff, but then I kind of got out of it after a while again. But I watch a lot of, the off the ball stuff, and they do nothing but talk about fucking rugby and that. And like, who's Ireland's next number 10? I'm like, Johnny Sexton's our number 10 now, and he's going to be. And then fucking after the World Cup, deal with that. Like, it's ridiculous.
No, we need to put Joey Carberry in for big game experience, even though he's definitely shit. Like,
he's been dropped now. Did you see that? He's not even in the squad for the Six Nations.
Just like, I don't know. Just they're obsessed with who's next.
They forced the poor fucker to move to Limerick, and then they never pick him. Like, what?
And like rugby league, Sky Sports try to push that, but I just don't. I don't know. I don't know why.
Rubbish.
It's very similar to rugby union in a lot of ways, but it's just rubbish to watch. I don't know why.
Right.
NFL I watch as well. I never got into basketball really. I don't know. I just like I watch a good documentary about basketball or something like that, but I don't know. As you said, kind of we talked about earlier, if it's the last minute and it's a tight game in like, a series defining playoff game or something like that, maybe if I happen to be flicking by, and I'll definitely stay for the last like minute or two, but to watch a full basketball game, no. But NFL, I definitely watch, full games and be quite a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings, and obviously they never win, but
I'm wearing my Packers jumper as we speak.
I struggle on. Hated rivals, the Packers with their stupid cheesehead stats.
We're always on the opposite side of things, Graeme. We're always on the opposite side. But Dublin win the All Irelands. Do you watch any of them, or do you just ignore them?
No, I don't. Nobody. No, I don't care about it. I don't know anybody on the team. I don't know anything about it. I don't know who the manager is. I didn't even know how many they won in a row. People were talking about that years ago all the time, but stuff on the radio I'd hear or flicking through the channels will be all I know about GA these days. Years ago, it used to be kind of bigger thing in Dublin. Now, whatever circles I'm in, anyways, nobody ever talks about GA.
The dog's like, we better let it go there, son. Graham, the dogs are looking for you, so we'll end it there on our shy talk. But this is a fun podcast. We just talked and answered your questions and had a bit of fun for the 400 episode. Probably an episode like we've never done before, if we're being honest. But we'll be back to normal next week, talking about the normal old stuff and having a chat about it. But big shout out to everyone, as I said, who has supported us down through the years. A shout out to yourself, Graeme. Shout out to Andrew McGahan, who was obviously here for the first 92 episodes or whatever it was, and the likes of Niall McGrath popped in a few times, and Ian O'Neill and Harry, and I think Andy Stevenson maybe even. I think Damon Martin was in once. Jeremy Botter was on a few maybe. Phil O'Connor was on a few as well. So there's been a wide array of different people on the SevereMMA podcast, and shout out to all of them, and obviously for everyone who's listening as well. If you'd like to see us continue to number 500, we will need you to sign up on Patreon, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. It's a $5 a month plus VAT. I need to start saying that now, because I see your second captain saying that, and when people are like, oh, it's not a $5 a month, it's like €6 a month or something. So $5 a month plus VAT. Not that bad. You get a shitload of stuff. You get this podcast earlier than usual, and you get the Q&A. You get the takeaways. You get Speaker's Corner, which is the best podcast.
I guess they torture me by making me talk about Man United's success and Liverpool's downfall for, how long was it? 45 minutes.
Yeah, you get the Chasing Pack. You got loads of stuff. So do that. Follow Graeme at SevereMMA. Follow me at Sean Sheehan BA. And we'll leave it there. Graeme, end it for us.
She's living in LA with my best old ex-friend Ray, a guy she said she knew well and sometimes hated.
We'll see you next Tuesday. Maybe.